Good morning. It's a beautiful day in Alberta, and we are in Banff National Park. We're Tom and Angel, and we're continuing our Rocky Mountain road trip. After a full day of traversing and sightseeing through the Icefields Parkway from Jasper, we finally arrived in Banff. Join us as we adventure through the trails, ride the iconic gondola, and explore Canada's first national park. We're starting our trip off today at Cave and Basin, which is a historic site because it is not only the birthplace of Banff National Park, but it is the birthplace of all of Canada's national parks.
Discovered in the late 1800s by railway workers who were just exploring the area, this area quickly became a desirable spot to tourists and entrepreneurs, which caused the federal government of Canada at the time to set it aside as a reserved space. Originally marking 10 square miles or 26 square kilometers, it was the first federally held parkland in Canada and now has grown to be 6,600 square kilometers, which is absolutely massive. It is very
If you could smell this right now, it smells like rotten eggs. And that's because of all the sulfur that's in this mountain and in the water. I'm very tempted to touch the water, but we're not supposed to.
Like Angel was saying, the sulfur smell is pretty abundant, and that's why this mountain is called Sulphur Mountain. If it wasn't for that sulfur smell, though, we never would have found this cave, and we never would have had national parks the way we have them today. When the explorers were traveling through the area, they were drawn to the smell. That's actually what caught their attention. They followed it, and the tunnel that we came in wasn't there at the time. There's just the hole in the ceiling, and they descended in, tracked down where the smell was coming from, and they found this pool of hot spring water. History tells us that the Stoney Nakoda have used this cave and basin as a ceremonial place for centuries, if not longer. So to say that the railway workers had discovered this is kind of a misnomer. I think more accurately we can say that they shared it with the rest of the world.
After being inspired by the Arkansas hot springs, in 1885 the Canadian government set us out a reserve around the Banff hot springs. And then 2 years later, after again being inspired by the Americans, making the first national park in the world, Canada followed suit, expanding this to 26 times its original size to form the Rocky Mountains National Park in Canada, and in the next decade adding 3 more national parks in Glacier, Yoho, and Lake Louise, which is now part of Banff, but at the time was its own national park.
So we've seen the cave, and now we're at the Basin, which is the thermal and mineral-rich water pool that all the tourists were bathing in years ago. At this point, we are not even allowed to touch the water because we want to preserve the natural Banff snails that live here. And touching it can change the chemical composition of the water, so it could also hurt the snails, so we're not allowed to do that now. We made it up to the cave's vent hole, which is where the discovery of the cave actually happened. They came across this hole in the ground and discovered a cave. Soon after its discovery, the 3 prospectors quickly built a log shack and saw the opportunity to bring tourists here because in the Rocky Mountains, warm water is really hard to come by. So although it smells like rotten eggs, it is nice and warm, and it smelled like money to them. This simple shack, this log cabin, was the humble beginnings of what is now a global destination, Banff National Park. We're doing an iconic trail that's not so far outside of downtown Banff. It's called Tunnel Mountain, and it should have a really nice view of the whole city.
Despite its name being Tunnel Mountain, there is no tunnel in this mountain. It was just a mountain that the railway thought that they would have to tunnel through, but instead went around it, which I don't know why that wasn't their first idea.
It would have been called Avoid Mountain.
Avoid Mountain does not bring as many tourists, though.
It is a very well-paved trail that overlooks the valley onto Mount Rundle, and it has a bunch of hoodoos along the way. Hoodoos! Hoodoos! I think we got here at just the right time because although it's very windy, we're getting the perfect view of the sunset right now over the mountains. It's beautiful.
I gotta say, no matter where you go in Banff, it seems like the views just follow you. Like we were just on that mountain, now we're over here. It's just as pretty. But now we get the sunset too.
We were just on that mountain. Tunnel Mountain. So Tom said something funny where he's like, hoodoos, oh, they used to be underground. And I'm like, no, hoodoos were the ground. That's because hoodoos were formed by erosion of like water and wind and other glacial melt. And the only reason that they didn't get washed away is because they had like an upper layer of really tough soil or even like a rock above them. So that prevented that piece of soil from being eroded. It's like a little hat. It's like a little rock hat. In town that night, we went to a sushi train restaurant for dinner, which might sound like a weird choice considering that we're on a mountain, nowhere near the ocean, but it ended up being really tasty and we had no regrets. And for dessert, we got ice cream from cows.
It's never too cold for ice cream.
Support Banff cows. I'm already so cold. Worth it. Just doing a post-dinner and dessert walk. It's really pretty in the nighttime. There's all these nice lights.
This place is so cool.
We've just made it to the Banff Gondola because we're gonna go up the mountain. Watch your head.
Oh, there's my backpack. Oh, jeez. Oh, jeez.
How high are we going?
Well, the lower elevation is 5,194 feet, so add that. It's already cold. The windows are wide open.
There's a window here that you can just stick your hand or your phone or your child out of. Below us we can actually see the switchbacks for the Sulphur Mountain Trail, which is a hiking trail that goes from the gondola at the bottom all the way to the peak. So if you want to hike this mountain, you totally can, but we're not doing that today.
If you do end up hiking the mountain, you can take the gondola down for free.
Oh,
That's something that I learned. So
nice.
You only have to do it one way.
Thank you. The whole trip was just about 7 to 8 minutes. Super quick. As you can see, there's a beautiful 360 view here at the top of the gondola building. They call it Above Banff, which is kind of cool.
It's an apt name.
Because that's what it is. It is snowing as per October in the Rockies. And we're gonna head over there to the peak of Sulphur Mountain.
How you feeling? Ready? How many layers are you wearing right now?
All of them. Pretty cool.
All right, folks, we made it to Sanson's Peak. This is the highest point on Sulphur Mountain, and it's named after Norman Sanson, the man who built the weather station that you see behind me. Norman Sanson used to use that weather station from 1903 to the mid-1930s, but when he was doing it, there were no stairs, there was no boardwalk, there was no gondola. He had to climb this mountain every single time. In fact, in the time that he was coming up here, he climbed this mountain over 1,000 times. And then in the 1930s, weather technology and stuff got better, so his job was obsolete. Rip. And then about 20 years later, in 1959, they decided to build the gondola and take advantage of a known beautiful viewpoint. Weather stations like these used to be scattered throughout the Rockies, and they were used to predict storms, weather patterns, major snowfalls, floods. The data that they collected at the time was revolutionary. The idea of being able to forecast weather and to plan in advance, it was unheard of. It gave us the ability to live in incredibly inhospitable environments like Banff, like the Canadian Rockies, you know, places that used to be you get in, you get out as quick as you can. Now, thousands of people call it home. These technologies are completely outdated now. We have satellites and balloons and all kinds of other technology, but this was an important starting point for it.
Okay, this actually scared me. Oh my gosh. Oh no. Oh, why? Why does this feel like it's going down really fast? Oh my gosh. No.
Haven't you been on actual
Oh my gosh. This is an 8-minute roller coaster. This is too fast.
It's really not that fast. The highest elevation Starbucks was disputed between this one and the one at the Columbia Icefields Discovery Center. I did some research. This one sits at 1,583 meters, where the one in the Columbia Icefields is at 1,900 and something meters. So by a whopping 400 meters, the Columbia Icefield wins.
So I have no regrets getting coffee at the top of the mountain now, because that was the one that was more worth it. The cool part about the Banff Gondola is that it is open all year round, so you can come here in the dead of winter and freeze your butt off at the top if you want to. That's it for our time in Banff National Park. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye! There's a beautiful 365 view. Nope. Gonna get some food. I'm thinking soup. And what better soup than ramen? Because noodles.
I love noodles.